you say, I feel good.
I feel good.
Turn to the person next to you and say, I feel good.
I feel good.
Turn to it on the other side and say, you look good.
You look good.
And turn to the front and say, you look great.
You look great.
Thank you. I wasn't going to not take advantage of that. All right, you guys. I hope that you are so set for an adventure because I have got a journey to take you on. So I hope you have your running shoes, an inhaler if you need, an oxygen tank for some of you, and really prepare yourself because my name is Shari, as you know, and I am a former professional long distance runner.
Oh my God.
I know, and I know you're thinking I should probably get back into running. But the truth is, before we take off, I just want to see a show of hands. Anybody here has or has had SOS?
What is SOS?
Well, it's not the scouring pad. SOS is Shiny Object Syndrome. Everybody knows what it is. So for those of you who don't know what Shiny Object Syndrome, it's basically where you think everything out there feels a whole lot better than everything in here.
Oh, okay.
And now, the thing about Shiny Object Syndrome is that it's super sneaky. It can disguise itself, if you're not careful, as goals and as missions and purpose and dreams. It also shows up as a bag of potato chips as well. So it's really anything that you think that you need that's going to make everything in here okay. So for those of you who are visual learners, I will just give you an example of what SOS looks like to me. Here you are, you're going about in your life, things are all right, you're in a good relationship, you know, maybe you could spare to lose a few pounds, your bank account is, but you're going on. And then one day you realize something is not quite right. I feel like there's something missing from my life and I can't really figure out what it is, but you've got everything on paper that looks good and then suddenly, there it is. Shiny object. And this is everything that's going to make everything okay for you. It's going to fulfill every part of you and you can't believe that you haven't seen this any sooner. Right there is the answer for everything. So what do you decide? You decide that you have to have it. And so you work your ass off to get to that shiny object. And along the way, it's really freaking hard and it's really challenging, but you're going to get there because this is going to make it all okay. And so you get there and you feel great. I mean, amazing. You're looking around and you're like, I am on cloud 9. It's so fluffy and everything's so shiny and everything feels amazing. Until it doesn't. Until one day you wake up and you're like, there's something missing. I don't know what it is. I just worked really friggin' hard to get here. And now there's still something else that I need. And so you start talking to your God or your universe and you're like, what? Ooh, what's that? Shiny object. That is what you needed all along. This thing that you were here was just a waste of time. You can't even believe that you didn't even see that any sooner. So you start the process all over again. You're working your ass off on your way to get there. And while you're getting there, you're realizing how ridiculously hard this journey is. And you're probably hating your journey the entire way, which of course is your life. But you gotta get there because that's gonna do it all. Now the universe, in all of its infinite wisdom, gives what I like to call the universal finger. And it's a tap. And it's like, you don't want to go that way. And you, in all of your infinite wisdom, like to give it the universal hand. And you keep going because this is gonna do it and this is gonna be it. And so you make it and you're there and things are great and you even got the Carlton dance and this cloud is even fluffier and everything is great. Until it's not. Now, usually by this point you've gotten the universal finger, you've even gotten the universal nudge, and you've probably gotten the universal shove. But at some point, if you have not listened along the way, you get what I like to call the universal blow. And that usually, not that one either. I heard a giggle. And usually how that shows up is usually some sort of tragedy. Some heartbreak, some sickness, some illness, really just something that knocks you to your knees. And for me, I found myself in in fetal position at the bottom of my shower with sobs and these unhuman-like sounds, guttural sounds coming from me. And I didn't know what was going on. All I knew was that with every cry and every sob, I kept trying to catch my breath, and more hot water was going down my throat, and my breathing was labored. And with every sob came another image. An image of the way that he touched me, and the helplessness that I felt, and the fear that I felt, and not being able to speak. It was the first time in 30 years that I had actually relived this moment. You see, I had talked about it all the time with people. I shared about my abuse. I spread it to the world. But it was always as if it was somebody else's life. It was always as if I was talking about somebody else and all the things that they did. But in this moment, for a reason that I can't explain except that it was my universal blow, this is the day that the memories of Jimmy came back to me. I was 7 years old, and I loved and trusted everybody. My mom said that when strangers would come around, that my sister would go and hide behind their legs. Not me. I would walk right up to you and make you my friend. And this day was no different. My mom told my sister that I had to go to the beach with her and her friends. Of course, to the dismay of my sister, but I was so excited to be there and with all of them. And my sister's friends' parents introduced us to Jimmy, their friend. And Jimmy asked me if I wanted to go to the sandbar and go for a piggyback ride. And seeing as if I wasn't uncomfortable with people, I thought, all right, why not? But one of the things that I remember from that day is calling out to my sister and saying, Tammy, barely through audible voice, come back here, come swim with us. And she looked at me and she was like, Shari, you're fine, just keep having fun. I wasn't having fun. And I told the lawyers that, and I told the judges that, and I told anybody that would listen to me that I was not having fun. But what I do remember in that moment, which I didn't understand what it was at the time, was this beaming light inside of me. This place that I went to that showed me that I'm gonna be okay. And that I just had to endure what was hell in that moment for the safety of myself and for my parents whom he threatened. I was later praised by everybody for how strong and brave and courageous I was. Strong to sit on a court stand and name parts of my body at 7 years old that nobody should ever have to do in front of strangers. Brave because I spoke up. And a hero because I had put a man in jail who had actually done this to other girls. So I had saved these other girls. But nobody ever asked me what I felt. All I was told was, you're strong and you're brave. And so I went out into the world like I'm strong and I'm brave, and I never got an opportunity to feel and deal with my own feelings. So I just showed up for the world stronger than most. Until I wasn't. Until I found myself huddled on the bottom of the shower floor. And I don't remember much except getting into my uniform. I was a waitress at the time and having to go to work. And there I was driving on the streets of Los Angeles, and tears are flooding down my face. I could barely see the road. And I pull over and I just called my boss, and some words mumbled out of me about abuse and memories. And I don't even know if I'm going to be able to come to work. And all she said, and it was still, and to me, still to this moment, the most peaceful, loving voice, at Shari, take whatever time you need. Go do what you got to do. And so I got back in my car and I got back home. And as I said, I'm one that believes in universal wisdom and signs. And so I got back into my bedroom, and there, right on my computer, it said, Sedona. Now, I didn't know much about Sedona. I just knew that there were some like red rock formations with vortexes and some energies and things like that. And the only thing I knew is that I needed to get whatever this was out of me. And so it sounded like the perfect place to go. So 7 hours and 25 minutes later, I showed up in Sedona, my shiny object. This was going to make it all okay. This is where I was going to do all of this healing. No expectations, as you can see. My whole entire life was going to change right then and there. I showed up to go to the vortex. Now, I usually do follow signs, as I said, but I for some reason chose to ignore the sign that said for professional hikers only. So I just kept making my way. I had done some hikes in Los Angeles, so in my mind, perhaps I was a professional. Well, when I found myself standing at the edge of a red rock looking at a cliff of over 50 feet down, I realized maybe I'm not such a professional. And I stood there in that moment, trying to figure out what I was going to do here, and the only thing I remembered was this light that I spoke about. And so I went in there, and she said, "You're gonna be okay." And somehow, as much as I wanted this thing out of me and these feelings, what I did know is that I did not want to hurl to my imminent death. So I found my way back off the side of the cliff and back around. Now, the interesting thing about Sedona is that people will talk about the things that happen there that nobody else knows about. Nobody knows what cliff I was speaking about. I went back and still have not found that place that I was speaking about. But I know that I was standing at the edge of that cliff, and so I thought to myself, well, I guess this has to be it. I mean, you showed up and you proved to yourself that you're brave and courageous. Nobody else had to do that for you. You got to figure that out on your own. Except that's never enough for me. I'm an overachiever, and so I decided I'm going to go to another vortex because somehow this didn't feel right. This wasn't the healing, even though I was trying to talk myself into it. And so about 4 hours later, I was completely lost on another vortex hike with about this much water left in my bottle, and seeing as if I'm not a professional hiker and ignored that sign once again, I had to figure out a way to get out of here. 2 more hours passed by and the sun was starting to go down, and that light inside was like, "Shari, you're gonna be okay." And so I somehow found my way out of this vortex, and this was it. I was now convinced that challenges, physical challenges you hear about sometimes change people's lives, and you have these major revelations. So this was it for me. I went and overcame this hurdle, and I saw my strength, and so I decided it was time to leave Sedona. But then I passed another vortex, and it was called the airport vortex, and I thought, maybe I'll give it one last try. And it sounds nearly as exciting as it is airport vortex, and so it wasn't a very hard climb. And right when I got up there and I was just taking the last look and view of all of these red rocks, I took my last breath and I turned, and there she was. Now I know that that sounds dramatic, but there she was. There I was, my 7-year-old self, sporting that boyish, awkward stage in my camp uniform, blue shorts with the white stripes down the side, my white Camp David t-shirt, knee-high white athletic socks with the double blue stripes, feathered hair, a little mullety. And she sat there, I sat there, her back up against the rock and her knees up against her chest and her arms wrapped around herself. And she just looked up at me and said, "Took you long enough." Sassy. And so I sat with her and I talked to her for what seemed like hours. You see, the last time her and I connected was 30 years ago. I had taken this beautiful, beaming light and I had put her in a compartment because she had learned at that young age that her voice and her truth hurt people. I learned that my voice and my truth put somebody in jail. I learned that my voice and my truth made my father feel shame because he didn't understand how to talk to his little girl about it. And so he said nothing at all. And for me, that silence was deafening. And the only thing I took from that is that he was ashamed of me. And my mom and my sister didn't know how to talk about it. It was 1981. Oprah wasn't out talking about sexual abuse. No one was really acknowledging it. And so the only thing they knew to do was to teach me lessons. Shari, you gotta stop being so naive. Shari, you can't just go off and trust strangers. Shari, and all I kept hearing was, "It's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault." And so for me, my voice and my truth were no longer good enough, and so I put that away. And what did become, is I became a super fine-tuned antenna for how you felt. I became very aware of everybody else's feelings and how I worked in them, and how can I create peace for you, and how can I make you feel good, and how can I show up for the world and make everybody feel good with this great, big, beautiful smile. And what ended up happening is that I ended up selling myself short through so much. I remember dating this guy, and he was a vegetarian. I told him I was a vegetarian as well. And for an entire year, all I wanted was a friggin' Big Mac. And then politics. I acted like I loved politics, and I hated every minute of it. And then all the guys that I dated, oh my God, the guys that I dated, they were all like, oh, we just want casual, no strings attached. And I'm like, yeah, me too. And inside, I'm like, love me. Why don't they love me? And so I just kept going on and on with this and stuffing my feelings more and more down. This light that just wanted to come out, I was like, no, you stay in there. But you can't hide those feelings for long. Those feelings showed up in a 270-pound body. Those feelings showed up in a bag of chips. The feelings showed up in partying and recreational drugs and booze and men. Shiny things, lots of shiny things. And as much as I want to say the men were horrible, it was freaking awesome at the time. It was in my 20s, I was in New York City, living the life of my dreams, going after this big acting career, and really all I did was party. And so we talked about that, because that point in my life, I had convinced myself that this is what I needed, that these men are what I needed, and just this drink was just for fun. Everything was just a good time in my life, but what everything was a shiny object for me. But I kept finding out that none of this felt good. I found myself in super unhealthy relationships. One example was standing in front of the door of a guy that I liked, another one that was just a casual relationship. But he actually took me out to lunch, so it felt like I was important. He had asked me to bring him McDonald's and a shake, and so I brought him a strawberry shake, and when he opened the door and saw it, he was expecting a chocolate one. And so I stood right there, and the next thing I know is that I had strawberry shake all over my face. And as I sat there with strawberry shake dripping down my face, the only thing I could do was look at him and say, why don't you respect me? How come you can't love me? And as I'm sitting there, I remember very clearly seeing myself from up above and looking at this girl who's begging for respect as she has strawberry shake down her face. And you would think that that would have been like my moment, like, you got it together, Shari, like this is it. But no, I went inside and spent the night there. But in the middle of the night, as I laid there staring at the ceiling, there was something in me that was like, Shari, you can't do this anymore. And so I grabbed my stuff and I snuck out of there, and I never answered another phone call from him again. And I never returned a text, and I never did anything except realize that maybe, just maybe, there was like this tad of respect in there for myself. And so I felt this shift happen in me. And so more and more, I read more self-help books. Like, I was reading self-help books before there was even a self-help section in the bookstore. It was like still under psychology. And you had to like figure these things out for yourself. And journals, I had like 26 journals of everything. Like, this is it, Shari, you can do it. You're gonna respect yourself. I promise, this is the day. God, why did I do that again? On and on with all of these ways that I was going to change my life. But those positive affirmations, they started to work a little. I started thinking about, well, man, if you left him, imagine what would happen if you weeded other people out of your life. Imagine what would happen if you started surrounding yourself with better people. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. And so I had figured it out. Gastric bypass surgery. Shiny object syndrome. I was going to remove all of the layers around me so that I was no longer hiding and I could show up for the world, and I was going to be everything I needed. I was going to be the famous actress. I was going to find a boyfriend. I was going to find love for myself. That was going to do it all for me. Now, I'm not going to lie. It was friggin' awesome at first. I lost 110 pounds. I dated a ton of guys, hotter guys in the first round. Except this time they maybe went out on 2 or 3 dates with me instead of 1. But what I ended up finding out is that I was still a lonely girl in a thinner body wishing to just be a happy girl in any size body. And so I just kept working and working at myself and trying to figure it out and reading more self-help books. And then finally, I realized all you need to do is love yourself more, Shari. And it seemed so obvious, but something that I had not really considered. And so then another shiny object showed up. More to love. It was a dating reality show by the creators of The Bachelor, and this time it was for real-sized women. And at this point, I was still a curvy girl, and so I was like, you know what? I don't even care about love anymore. Because I'm an overachiever, am going to go on this TV show, and I am going to change the standard of beauty in all of the world. And I say that laughing, but I was under such belief that I literally was going to make all of America fall in love with me and see past my weight. And so that was the goal, that was it, this is what was going to change my life. So I got sent home the first night. That didn't end up going so well. But what did end up happening is that if any of you guys watch reality TV, they have like the confessionals. You guys know about the confessionals. So I was in the interview with them, and when I was on the date with my supposed, infatuated lover, this girl came up in an evening gown and she jumped into the swimming pool right there on our date. And so while I was in this confessional, they were asking, so how did you feel about this girl ruining your date? And I thought, well, you didn't really ruin it. And they said, well, she did kind of disrespect you. What did you feel about that? And I said, well, if he wasn't meant to be mine, then he wouldn't have been distracted by it. And so they kept asking and trying to goad me and saying, well, what else do you want to say about her? And then finally I said, you're asking me to say something and to be something that I'm not. And there was silence. She picked up her walkie-talkie. She talked to some producers. And the next thing I knew was that the lights were shut down and they escorted me out. Now, when I got home, and a few months later when this aired, everybody on the East Coast was so excited for me, and everyone started texting me about it, and they were all like, you look so beautiful, oh my God, I'm so excited for you, and then the text stopped. And then it started on the West Coast, oh my God, you look so beautiful, and then the text stopped. Nobody knew what to say because everybody felt so badly that I had been cut, and the only thing I wanted to do was scream on the inside, no, don't you get it? Like, I spoke up for myself, don't you get it? I gave up these 15 minutes of fame for speaking my voice and having some integrity. I walked out of there not selling myself short, and for the first time in my life, I felt like this shift had happened in me, and somebody was holding my heart up, and I was like, I can breathe on my own. Which then led into the man, to my man. And for the first time in many, many years, I felt like I didn't have to be this strong and brave girl on my own. I felt like I had someone that was actually supporting me, and someone that saw me, and someone that loved me just for me. I didn't have to show up as anybody else but me. And he was gonna move to LA, he was across the country, and we were gonna get a place together. And so I told my roommate, hey, you gotta go, boyfriend's coming in. And so we had this whole planned life. It was gonna be amazing. So you can only imagine what that felt like when he broke up with me. I felt like I was drowning again in this breathing that I was finally doing, that I was being sucked back underwater, dropped in the middle of the ocean with ankle weights around me and just drowning again. And so the only thing that made sense at that time was to go off to Italy and meet hot Italian men. And I thought, shiny object, this was it. Elizabeth Gilbert had done it in Eat, Pray, Love. I was gonna do this, I'm calling it Heal, Write, Love, and I was gonna heal my heart, I was gonna write a book, and I was gonna fall in love. This was really everything that I had planned. And the whole reason why he broke up with me is so I could finally go and live my dream. Well, I decided that I needed to sell my car. I was a waitress, I had no money. I went and sold all of my personal belongings, quit my job of 14 years, and then I fundraised the rest of the money, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I went off to Italy. Arrivederci, Los Angeles. Buongiorno, Italia. Except I did walk around saying buongiorno, principessa to everybody. Like the movie Life is Beautiful. And then I finally realized that people looked at me like I had 6 heads. And so I showed up in this town called Vinci. And Vinci was the hometown of Leonardo da Vinci, where about from the 1600s, the people that now lived there were just about that same age. The median age of them was so old that none of them spoke English, not a soul. And so when I talked about a solo adventure, I mean it. But do you know what happens when you show up in a town where nobody speaks your language? You end up having to really deal with yourself. I had to really sit with myself and figure out who I was. What did I like? I didn't even know that I liked lampposts. I was like walking down the street going, oh my God, that's the most beautiful lamppost. And then walking into churches and being, oh my God, this church is so beautiful. And I'm Jewish. So that was weird in itself. Like everything about this trip to me was perfect. I walked through olive groves. And I made up stories about the people that walked before me, and I bought this great Italian skirt, and I twirled in it, and I sang, and I did all of these things. I ate a lot of pasta, which, by the way, you can get really tired of. Salami and cheese, not so much. Barrels and barrels of cheese, and then I learned I could put down a lot of wine, which I know you've all experienced here with me. But what it did for me is that it allowed me to be super present with myself, because what most of us don't realize is that we're kind of conditioned to show up in the world the way that others expect us to. So if you're the person that's always the jokester with everybody, when you show up and you're not the jokester, people are like, what's wrong, are you okay? Sure. You know? And then when you show up and you're not the nurturer, what's wrong, are you okay? And so you learn to fit into these roles. And so I was always the happy girl, and always the one that makes everybody feel good, and always the outgoing and gregarious one. And then I show up in this country and I'm actually kind of shy. Like, I walk in places and I just kind of feel it out, and I sit there and I wait for somebody to say something to me, but most of them couldn't speak English, so that didn't happen. And I just kind of figured out from moment to moment who I was. And I remember on this one particular day in my favorite church in Florence, San Miniato al Monte, and I would always go right before the sunrise because I loved the smell of the candles from the day before, and I loved watching the sun come in through the stained glass windows, and I loved the creaky old church floors. And it was this one particular morning on day 93 of my 90-day journal, Don't Tell Immigration. And I was standing there and I was just basking in the warmth of the sun and thinking about what this journey's been like. And then it came back to me, the final conversation that I had with her on the rocks of Sedona. And the last thing that I said to her was, listen, I love you, but I can't protect you any longer. I have kept you hidden. I have kept you away from people. I have kept you in a compartment, but I have to let you go. I have to go out and be the woman that I'm here to be. And so I just looked at her and I told her I loved her, and I walked away. And every part of me wanted to look back at her, but I was afraid maybe, just maybe, she wasn't there, even though I knew she was. And so I left, and there was still this empty feeling within me that was like, something is not quite right. And as I stood in that church in San Miniato al Monte with the sun coming on me, I realized it was as if my whole entire life flashed before me. And I thought, Shari, you weren't supposed to leave her. You were supposed to love her. I was supposed to look at her and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that nobody ever said they were sorry to you. I'm sorry that nobody ever hugged you. I'm sorry that nobody ever supported you or told you all the things that you needed to hear. I'm sorry. But I'm here now with you. And I will support you. And I will love you through this. And we will get through this together. And no matter what happens in your life, I will be with you. That's what she needed for those 30 years. That's what I needed. I needed to stop running from everything she needed, from that beautiful beaming light. I needed to stop talking about the shiny things and I need the acting job, or you need to write the next book, or you need to do all of these things. You see, the shiny things are great. They're the ones that support what you do, but they do not make you who you are. And so I left Italy, and I realized that I didn't write this book that I fundraised money for. The only thing that I had done was write these daily journals. And so I went back thinking, how do I take what I just happened to me and everything that I learned, and then I still haven't written my book, and what do I do? And so for almost 4 years from then, I kept waiting for this perfect ending. What's gonna be the victory lap? Where's the big finale? I gotta end this book somehow in some great grand way. The big finale, the big ending? This is it. We just keep going. We give ourselves room to grow. We give ourselves permission to try and permission to fail. And then we love ourselves and forgive ourselves and are compassionate with ourselves when we do. You see, most of us go through life just wanting to be seen and wanting to be heard and wanting to know that our life had some great meaning in it. And so we show up and try to get all of these things to prove that. But what about if we stopped? What about if we took our shoes off? What about if I stopped just trying to be loved? And you stopped trying to be heard? And he stopped trying to be seen, and you stopped trying to have expectations of the world, and we all just be. For me, I want to invite you to invite your younger self, or wherever that moment in time was for you, where you feel like you have perhaps run from. Invite yourself in. Set up a nice, cushy spot within your soul. Tell them to take their shoes off. Welcome them home. And stay a while. Wow.
That was